share my screen with you. Okay, so learning unit 2, multimodality. So guys, I don't see the chat. So if you do, and I don't see your hands raised when I'm on the other screen. So if you do have anything, please just yell out. I don't mind if you interrupt me, rather than have a question unanswered. But I'm looking at the screen that you're looking at. I'm not looking at the chat or the hands. So first things first, multimodality. What do you guys, okay, I'm back again. I'll see your hands. What do you guys understand by multimodality?
I think we all experience it nowadays when we teach, because even if you just stand in front, you'll be drawing on the board, and or you might have a poster. So it's reaching them in different ways with speaking, sound, and images, words, all that.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what it is. Anyone else want to jump in and add on? Please feel free to just unmute. Okay. So no idea. We'll do our very best to make sure that that is changed by the end of the session. Using different modes of communication, multimedia. Yes, excellent. Okay, so multimodality means to convey information in different ways. Exactly. Through speaking, through reading, through writing, through gestures, videos, posters. So if you have information that you want to give to your students, you don't just want to give it to them in one way. You don't just want to stand in front of the class and just talk to them for an entire lesson. That is going to be torture for everyone. Now, you'll find you already use multimodality, whether that's what you call it or not, either in the lessons that, if you're not teaching yet, in the lessons that you've thought about and you've sort of planned in your head, or else in the lessons that you actually do teach. Multimodality is when you use different modes to communicate. So if you stand in front and talk, and then you turn and you use a poster, you are using multimodality. If you are talking to the class and then you turn around and you write on the whiteboard, that is multimodality because you're using speaking and writing. If you then take the whiteboard marker and divide the whiteboard into 4 sections, and you put one lot of information in one section, the next lot of information in the second section, the third lot in the third section, that is using space and visual cues to show the information. So when we talk about the different modes, we are talking about speaking, we are talking about written text, we are talking about audio, and we're talking about space. So that is gestures, body movement, the way you set up your classroom. So we always want to use multimodality because the more ways we learn something, the more ways we remember it and understand it. However, very important, it's not about putting words, sound, images, or videos in the same text. It's about sending a message. So what you want to remember is, yes, you want to make your classroom multimodal. You don't just want to sit and talk, or you don't just want to sit and have your students read all the time. you want to use different modes. So you want to show them a video. You want to use a slideshow. You want to write on the board so that to emphasize what it is that you're saying. You want to show them a picture to help them to grasp the meaning of something. So all of those are examples of multimodality. So just to clarify quickly, when we talk about the modes, we're talking about speaking, writing, audio, and spatial. Sorry, speaking, writing, visual, audio, and spatial. So there are 5. When we talk about the medium is the means through which you use or you show the visual. So you can use a poster, that is the medium, or you can use a slideshow, that is your medium. In this case, I am using a slideshow to present a visual with writing on it. So the medium is the slideshow. The mode is the visual and the written text. So this is a multimodal thing that you are doing, that you are experiencing now, because you've got the visual, you've got the text, and you have me speaking as well. But you don't want to put in different modes just for the sake of it, because that leads to overload and overstimulation. You want to think very carefully, why am I putting this image up here? I'm putting this image up here because hopefully it's still relevant. The Dark Knight Rises is amazing film, and it's pretty iconic, that image of Heath Ledger as the Joker saying, it's not about, I can't remember what the original was, but it's about sending a message. So this is relevant in that it ties back to the idea of you not just putting things into your lesson just because you can. It's about deciding on what is going to be most impactful and why you're putting it in there. So you always want to consider what your reason is. Now, that is actually going to be dictated by the content that you are trying to convey. If you are doing visual media, for example, you are going to need visuals. If you are doing reading comprehension, you are going to need a text for the students to read. So you do need to make sure that you are looking at what is the best way to convey information. Okay, first things first, any questions here? Or anything that you want to clarify or add to? Okay, great. So now,
Oh, hey Sheldon, what's going on?
I need your opinion on a matter of semiotics.
I'm sorry.
Semiotics, the study of signs and symbols, is a branch of philosophy related to linguistics.
Okay, sweetie, I know you think you're explaining yourself, but you're really not.
Just come with me.
okay, so hopefully you heard that. And at the very end, they're standing in front of the door with a tie hooked over the doorknob. Now, you'll notice Sheldon used the word semiotics, and he said it's the study of signs and symbols. And he takes her to go and look at a sign, a visual sign that has been put out for him to receive a message. So he needs to decode what that sign means and understand what the message is. Obviously, we all by now hopefully know what it means if there's a tile on a doorknob. Essentially, don't enter. So when we talk about semiotics, we are talking about the study of signs and symbols. So we are talking about words are signs. Visual images are signs. Anything that conveys information to us are signs. So there are several semiotic systems. So there's your audio semiotic systems, your visual semiotic systems, your textual semiotic systems, your spatial semiotic systems. So these are the signs that we interpret. So right now, you are interpreting audio semiotics. So you are listening to the words I'm speaking and then decoding what they mean. You might also be looking at the screen and see that I am using my hands a lot. That is spatial semiotics. Unfortunately for you guys who are distracted easily, I am half European, so I do tend to use my hands a lot, which can be distracting. So I do apologize for that. So we need to actually understand the semiotic systems before we can use them. We need to understand, if we have a visual, we need to understand what that visual represents. What do the colors represent? What does the placement of the figures represent? What does the extra background, what does that represent? Is there anything that is missing from the picture that should be there? What does that represent? Now, clearly, we need to understand these semiotic systems in order to use them effectively. So to understand spatial semiotic systems, you have to think about how are you going to set out your classroom? What message is it going to send? How is this going to work in an educational setting? If you put them in rows, just plain rows, that's going to be very difficult to do group work in. If you're going to put them in groups, then you have to also realize that some of them are not going to be able to see you. So you need to understand what the pros and cons are of both of these spatial semiotics. As I explained, visual semiotics, the words that you use, words all have connotations. Are you using the most effective words to convey the information? Are your learners most likely to decode your words in the way that you intended them to? If you write on the whiteboard and you just write down certain key words, have you understood which are the most key words in order to write down what you are trying to convey? So the more you understand about these semiotic systems, the more likely you are to be effective in your teaching. And roundabout now, you should be connecting semiotic systems with modes. So yes, they are connected. The modes are made up of the semiotics. So words make up text. So that is visual, that is textual semiotics. Pictures or gestures make up your, so pictures make up your visual, gestures make up your spatial. So the semiotic systems, there is text, there is visual, there is audio, there is spatial, and then there is I'm sorry, I've just glitched. It's your text, your audio, your visuals, your spatials. So yeah, the 4 of them. So essentially, you have to understand what you are doing before you can use it effectively. Before we move on, do you guys have any questions? Anything that you want to ask or double check at this point?
Hi, Amy.
Hi, yes.
So would audio semiotics, could it be either your voice or music you play or the sound from a YouTube video? It could be
Yes.
various sounds.
Yes, any sounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alexandra?
Yes, hello. I'm
Hi.
just a bit confused about the visual ones, because you mentioned, you know, they've got movement and then you've got images and then you've got text. So these are all sub underneath the visual, or they are separate?
Oh, so those are all separate. So text is writing. So each word is a symbol that needs to be decoded. Visual is something that you look at. So it's an image. Then your spatial is your gestures, your movements. So if you stand very close to someone, that actually is a sign that you're either very intense or you're trying to intimidate them or you're trying to get close to them. And
Okay. Body
decoding
language.
it will depend on the context.
Yeah, body
Okay.
language.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Body language is
yeah.
part of the gestural
Yeah.
semiotic system.
I'm guessing hieroglyphics is a bit of a gray area.
Yes, that would be a combination of visual and text.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. Is there...
So spatial is gestural.
Yes. So any use of space or gestures. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, are we all good? Right. So let's go back to my medium of a slideshow and some questions. So here is an example of semiotics gone awry. What does IDK, LY, and TTUL mean? I don't know, love you, talk to you later. So what has happened is the mom has seen these acronyms, has asked what they meant. The daughter has obviously replied, or the son, by decoding what these letters mean. But the mom does not understand that. She does not understand that that message was the decoding of the symbols, of the letters. So she says, okay, I will ask your sister. She obviously thinks that the child is responding, I don't know what they mean. I love you. I'll talk to you later. So that is what happens when you don't understand the semiotic system. So some thoughts for you guys to consider. Why is it important for you as a teacher to understand semiotic systems? Explain the difference between medium and modes. Discuss the pros and cons of using multimodality in a diverse FET classroom. So I'm going to give you some hints there. Some of the pros are what we've spoken about, is it's more interesting. The more ways you teach something, the more ways you learn something, the more likely you are to understand it. It's also just a more interesting, and you're more likely to grab the learner's attention. It also allows learners with different learning styles to understand the work more easily. The cons are you can overdo it. So if you use audio and visual and videos and posters and you write on the board all in one lesson, it's going to be too much. A lot of your students are just going to start shutting down. Also, if you don't use it effectively, then it's going to dilute the effectiveness of your lesson. And finally, you are going to have students who are not prepared to decode these different semiotic systems. So for them, it might be something very out of the ordinary. So they might struggle to decode what it is you're trying to say or what you're trying to convey. One of the easiest examples of this is spatial, is how close or how far you stand from a learner. That is very culturally dependent, because different cultures have different spaces that they consider comfortable. Some cultures, it's more comfortable to stand further away. Other cultures, that's seen as being very rude and cold, and standing close together is a comfortable distance. So you do have to take those sort of things into account. And then what you need to consider when planning a multimodal lesson, obviously you're looking at things like your content, your the availability of the resources, because it's great to have a video planned and an interactive slideshow when in fact you don't have a projector. So you do need to consider that. You need to consider what is most effective. Are you going overboard? Are you providing enough to be interesting? Are you catering to different learning styles? So that's just some ideas there. Now, gamification. Does anyone want to take a guess what that is?
Hi, sorry. Gamification is the taking of any material and creating a form of game or form of study that allows us to use gaming mechanics to actually teach the actual material in an easy way.
Yes, excellent. Well done. Does anyone want to add to that? Okay, so I think you've covered everything that needs to be said on that. Gamification is essentially turning learning into a game. Now, that is a great way to teach, because we as humans respond naturally to games, whether it's video games, whether it's games on the playground, whatever it is, we respond naturally to information that we play with. So gamification is a fantastic way to consolidate information, to introduce new information. It's just a really great way for the learners to get involved. The most cliched version of gamification that we've got is, of course, Kahoot, which learners actually love, even though as a teacher it gets a bit boring because you've used Kahoot so often. Students really do love that simple Kahoot game. For those of you that don't know, it's you project the quiz onto the screen and they have their devices, they link up to that game, and you ask multiple choice questions. And based on who gets the correct number of answers and who gets the answers in the shortest time will determine who the winner is. Now, that is fantastic. However, can anyone give me any cons of gamification? Any drawbacks?
Sorry, myself again. I found that my learners sometimes get distracted more by the game and by winning than actually the material that I'm trying to teach. So you have to have a fine balance between the two of having it fun and enjoyable, but at the same time being able to assess and make sure that the objectives have been met for the lesson.
Yes, exactly. Once again, excellent answer. It is very easy for the learners to get distracted by the game itself and not the focus on the actual content. Yes, exactly, Candice. Sometimes it's just a gimmick. It's not addressing the objectives. So it can be very tempting to put lots of gamification into your class because the learners enjoy it. They're engaged, which is good. But you have to think very carefully about what games you are playing. Are these games actually teaching the learners something? So Kahoot is quite good for consolidating information or for introducing information, but it doesn't provide any sort of deep analysis. Where games are actually really good is for teaching language. There are lots of language games where you have to type in the correct answer to advance to the next level, or like the very old little spaceship where you had to shoot all the aliens, where you have to shoot the correct term or the correct word. So there are lots of games like that that actually force them to concentrate. But you want to really make sure that it is, in fact, adding to the learning experience. And then, of course, once again, you always have to think about the diversity, because some students are very competitive, they love games. Other students are not competitive. Some students might feel that this is not taking learning seriously. And then we get the big one, which is that some students, if you are using games that require online participation, some students do not have access to it, or they are not very good at online participation because they have not had the exposure to digital means, which brings us very neatly into the digital divide. So what I want to do now, we're just opening this. Now, there is our first divide. On this side, we have digital literacy. And then on this side, it is not letting me add more text. Okay, we have Would almost have become a doctor. Digital fluency. Thank you very much. So, this is your chance to do a little bit of typing, or you can even do some writing like I did. What do you understand by digital literacy and digital fluency? Okay, excellent. So you guys really have got this, you understand it. So literacy, you've nailed this one. Having the knowledge and skills, having the knowledge of basic skills with regard to technology. Yes. Digital literacy focuses on basic skills and knowledge. Yes. Having access to and experience in the digital space. Absolutely. The ability to use digital technologies like computers, smartphones, and the web. 100%. So literacy, as we know, is when you can use the language. You understand and you can use it. Now, that's exactly what digital literacy refers to, is you know, can understand, and can use technology. So you know how to send an email, you know how to create a basic spreadsheet, you know your way around a computer. Digital fluency, more adept at using digital technology. Absolutely. Time and experience to recognize and use the digital space in a meaningful manner. Digital fluency encompasses a deeper understanding of the ability to adapt and innovate using those skills of digital literacy. Lovely way to put it. So digital fluency means that you are more capable and adept at digital technology. So literacy means that you can understand it. Fluency means that you can really move to creating with it. So if you are literate in another language, you can read and write it generally, and you generally can speak it. You can get away with it. If you are fluent, you know it backwards and forwards. So being digitally fluent means that you have a deeper understanding of technology. You, for example, digital fluency means you can draw up a basic spreadsheet. Being digitally fluent means you can draw up one of those spreadsheets that sings and dances and adds and computes and does everything you need it to do. I've been told that you can use spreadsheets like that. I myself would categorize myself as digitally literate, not digitally fluent. So I wouldn't know how to do one of those spreadsheets. Now, by the way, any questions on that? Okay, now how do I? It has to be a faster way. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to leave this line up here. As you can see, I'm digitally fluent because I can clear the screen eventually. Someone who was, sorry, I'm digitally literate because I could clear the screen. Someone who is digitally fluent would know how to do that with one stroke. Now, I am going to leave this line here. This is the digital divide. And I want you guys to write down what you think the digital divide is. Okay, great. So on one side, we have access to the internet, technology, and space to experiment in technology, access to technology, those who have access to technology versus those who don't. Urban schools may tend to have more access to technology, absolutely, and we're going to look at that in a moment. Then on the other side, unequal access to digital technology, limited to no access to the internet and or resources that can be used in that space, describes those who have access and can benefit from tech and a group that gets left behind because they don't have access. The gap between those with access to technology, the internet and digital literacy training and those who do not could be cultural or social, also depends on personal inclinations. Okay, excellent work here. Definitely. There is a divide, and it's not, as I'm sure you have realized now, it's not just a straight line down a piece of paper. It's a spectrum. So on one hand, we have people who have no access to technology or very, very limited access to technology. And then on the other side, we have people who have enormous access to technology, who have had the space and the opportunities to learn and to become fluent. Now, what is very, very important is this is actually a socioeconomic issue more than anything else, because the reality is some people cannot afford technology. Now, that means that they may not be able to afford a device. Might mean that they do not have access to the internet. Might mean that they do not have access to electricity. It might mean that their family only has one device. It might mean that during load shedding, they don't have inverters to keep the Wi-Fi going. It might mean that they've got 2 devices between 5 members of the family and limited internet. So you have people who just don't have access to the technology. On the other side, you have people whom every member in the family has access to a device. There is uncapped Wi-Fi. If you're really lucky, you've got an inverter so that during load shedding, you've got lights and you can carry on using your devices. So there's a huge spectrum of people who have different access to different technology. Yeah, the price of data is out of control. Now, there's been a very good point made. Urban schools may tend to have more access to technology, definitely. And the more quote unquote rich a school is, the more access there is going to be to technology. Now, in some ways, this is a great blessing because the students all have access to technology. In some ways, it really emphasizes the digital divide in that you do have students who do come from a lower socioeconomic background and therefore are less likely to have the sort of access to technology that their classmates have. And it almost becomes more pronounced. So,
Yeah.
when we become aware of this digital divide, it impacts on our teaching because we want to use technology. And there's no point in shying away from technology. Technology is here to stay. And the more digitally fluent you become, the better it is for you. because we're never going to go backwards in terms of technology. We are only going to go forwards. We are only going to need to develop more skills. So we don't want to hide from technology, but as teachers, you do have to be aware that this divide does exist. And it exists in the sense that you have to, when you think about how you are going to teach, about what sort of work you are going to give your students, you do have to take into consideration, do they all have access or equal access to that technology? Because you might have a brilliant idea, and that is that in groups, the students are going to, in groups or in pairs, they're going to get together and they are going to create a short video, either enacting a scene from Shakespeare or conducting an interview between two characters of the text that you're reading. You might want them to do individually, they must all create a video of themselves as a news reporter reporting on the events of the book you're reading. Now, those are fantastic ideas, don't get me wrong. They really do the interesting ways to get the learners to participate. But you have to be very careful. Does every student have access to a device where they can record a video? Do they have the capacity to download that video and email it to you? Now, the difficult part is you can't really just ask them, because that is going to be really humiliating for the one child in the class who does not have access to a smartphone. So they're not going to want to put up their hand and say, yeah, I'm behind everyone else. Or you might have the child whose parents don't allow them access to a smartphone, which is, of course, their parents' choice, but it does restrict them in terms of what they can do. So if you are setting some sort of assignment, you have to make sure that you are allowing the students equal access to facilities. So things like, if you want them to do something on the computer, some sort of presentation on the computer, you have to set some time aside in which to take your class to the computer room, to the school's computer room, so that the students can use the school's computer. If you're giving them a homework assignment that requires access to computers, you have to give them enough time that those students who don't have access at home can now access the school's facilities. If the school does not have the facilities for the assignment that you give the students, then you have to reconsider the assignment, because if they don't have access at school, is every single child going to have access at home? And if they're not, what's happening now is that you are creating a very unequal system where some students can very easily complete the project, whereas for other students, it's very difficult. Now, this comes into play as well when you're marking, and it can be very difficult because you might, for example, give them an autobiography to write, and they have to do a little booklet with an autobiography. And some students are going to hand in, 3 A4 pages that they've folded into an A5 booklet, and they've written it out. Other students are going to hand you in the most beautiful portfolio you've ever seen. Color printed, it's bound, it's typed. Now, you don't want to discredit the effort that has been put into either of them, but you don't want to be distracted by all the bright, shiny things on the student who had access to all this various technology to create this beautiful work of art. What you want to do is you want to look at how much effort each child has put in. If the child hands in like 2 straggly pieces of A4 paper that clearly were they're just torn out of the exam pad, there's spelling mistakes all over, there's no effort to create any images to go with the autobiography, that child has not put in effort. If they've taken the time to fold the paper properly, to draw, even if they might not be great at drawing, they've taken the trouble, and you can see they've gone to pains to try and create illustrations. You have to take that into consideration. So it's very easy to sort of be a bit dazzled by presentations and what the students can do. But instead of looking at what the end product looks like, you want to look at how much effort has gone into this. And I mean, as I say, just because it is very swanky and very digitally savvy doesn't mean they didn't put a lot of effort into it. So you do want to credit that effort, but you don't want to penalize the students that didn't have access to that sort of technology to create such a polished and beautiful final product. Okay, any questions?
Amy,
Yes.
I'm just wondering, in the assignment where we have to choose one of the 3 options, I think it's in question 3,
Yes.
and then we've got to put together something to show how we teach it.
Yes.
So would it be sort of overkill to do a presentation and a Kahoot? Is just one enough, or is the Kahoot sort of a dangerous thing in the light of what you just said?
Yes, a Kahoot is great to add to it. I am going to tell you right now, a Kahoot by itself isn't going to be good enough. But doing a presentation and a Kahoot shows excellent use of multimodality, gamification. You just want to check that your Kahoot questions are designed to assess what the learners have learned.
Okay, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions about this? Okay. We do have 5 more minutes, so I do want to just touch on this. And this is learning, getting to know learner preferences. So what I want you to take away from this is that learners have preferences. Okay, but very important, these are not static. So if you are a visual learner, so these are the types of preferences: visual, auditory, reading and writing, or kinesthetic. If you have a preference for kinesthetic learning, that does not mean that every single time you are taught something or you want to study something, you have to study it in a kinesthetic way. No, there are times where you actually would prefer to learn it in a visual way. Or there are times when someone who prefers reading and writing, so they want to look at the textbook, would actually prefer to listen to the audio. So these are the 4 types of preference, but that does not mean that they cannot learn in another way. So a kinesthetic learner can learn through chalk and talk. It is more difficult for them, but they can do it. I speak from experience as a kinesthetic learner. there was none of this rubbish when I was at school. It was mainly chalk and talk, and somehow I got through. So a kinesthetic learner, by the way, is a learner who learns through doing things. So these are the learners who will create their own notes, who want to do the science experiment before they sit and read about it in the textbook. Your visual, those are the students who want to do mind maps, who want to look at images, who will respond best to the play or the movie instead of the written out play. Auditory, those are your learners that are going to sit there. They are staring at you, they're paying attention, but they're not really taking down too many notes because they are focused on what you're saying. And then reading and writing, those are the students who want the textbook, who want the written out notes. As I say, they are not static. Now, the other thing I want to remind you is to go back to our Dark Knight Rises. It's not about how many different types of preferences you can fit into one lesson. It's about sending a message. So you will not be able to cater to every single learner in every single lesson. And that is absolutely fine. If you try and cater to all of the learning preferences, it's most likely that your lesson is going to be a mess. However, you want to try and cater to as many different types of students as is practical. So, for example, in the next section where we do the stages of the lesson, in the introduction, you might want to show a short video. And then during the teaching and learning phase, you might want to talk and write on the board. And now you have, you've got the audio learners, you've got the visual learners, you've got the written learners. Okay, maybe the content does not fit for the kinesthetic learners, but they've got those three other ways to learn it, and that's absolutely fine. Okay. Any questions? Any questions on any part of the course as a whole?
Amy, sorry, I've got another question for the assignment question 3.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's say one puts together PowerPoint which you want to deliver. In the past, I've had to, PDF that, so I can't send in a PowerPoint. But then the trouble with that is that the animation can't be seen, so the slides look very full. Is that something that one must just kind of live with?
So what you can do is you can make notes on the PDF. So you can add comments on the side or just notes at the bottom to explain what the transition would be.
Okay, thanks. And is there a limit? Do you have like a rough idea of how long you get teachers who have like way long PowerPoints and then others only have 10 slides. Do you have a guideline for us?
So I'm afraid I don't have the assignment in front of me, but I think it's for 12 marks, if I'm not mistaken. So you don't need to put together an entire comprehensive slideshow that you would use to teach the entire poem completely throughout an entire lesson, if that makes sense. You want it needs to cover the relevant content, the most important content, but you don't need to go into all the nuances of the poem.
So we don't need to analyze line for line in that kind of
thing. No. And if you have one page where you sort of have notes all over it, analyzing the poem, that is a resource, but you don't need to have an entire slideshow where the nuances of every line are explained.
That makes sense. And then just the last question. We've got to choose between the different approaches.
Yes.
So, either genre or the other two. Do we assume that the learners have already been introduced to that concept? So do we assume that our learners know what chronology is or know what themes are? Or are we also teaching them the concept?
What it is the first part of the question, if I'm not mistaken, requires you to explain it. So that's assessing whether you understand it. Now, the actual learners don't need to know that you are using the chronological approach, but it will come out very clearly in your resource that obviously you have information on the time that it was written in. Or you don't need to explain to them we are using the author approach, but you have information on the author in your resource. So it will come through without you actually explaining it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Right, so guys, I've actually gone 4 minutes over and I do apologize, especially for tonight. So I'm going to say good night to you guys. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a fantastic long weekend. If you have any questions or if you want to double check anything, I'm here. Please feel free to take advantage. Okay. Good night, everyone.